All right. Thank you, everybody. My name is Max. This is Mario. We're running a Polkadot-focused VC fund, and we've been mainly focusing on Parachain auctions. But obviously, since we're transitioning over to core time, there are quite a few changes in our business model as well. So let me first kick it off over to Mario to give a bit of an introduction, and then we talk more about what we do.
Hi, also from my side. So we will briefly touch the old model. I think most of you are familiar with it, so we won't spend too much time on it and focus more on the tokenomics / how to incentivize retail and investors to support you in a crowd loan, since we know that there are some of you who still want to go for Parachain, and then hand it over to Max to talk about how we see the change and how we can also, and the market can work with projects to help secure core time. So the change came back in Copenhagen with Gav's talk back there when he introduced core time. I think there's been good progress, as you know. There's been a few panels on that. So the current old model is Parachain auctions. Why do we have auctions? Because Blockspace is limited, so you need to efficiently allocate those. And the auction mechanisms have, well, initially they were probably way too expensive, but I think over time it has become quite an efficient tool to price the lease. Not going to talk much why you should go for Parachain slot. I think most of you are familiar on that. But I think questions to ask yourself before becoming a Parachain or before buying core time is, do you actually need it, or can you build on an existing project already? There's some projects like Moonbeam, they have quite a few applications running there already. You have like Tansi, which is offering also easy access. So there's quite a few solutions for existing Parachains. So you ask yourself, do you need it? Firstly, can you afford it? Are you ready to launch? Obviously, you don't want to spend too much resources like time that you have access to the chain and not using it. Launch Kusama first, Polkadot, and token listing. Tokenomics is important. As you've seen early on, projects gave away 20% of total supply even just to get the Parachain lease, which obviously is in our view a bit too high. So you should also like have an efficient tokenomics to make sure you have continuous resources for either Parachain leases or for core time. On the auctions, I mean, there's this nice website parachains.info which aggregates the data. JS, I guess you guys are more familiar with it as well. But this is really a nice tool to put it in a more graphical way. It's a candle auction, so any timestamp in that time window can be randomly selected, which means it's not just who bids the most at the end of the auction, but it actually means like you need to be in the lead already at the beginning of the auction. So you can either self-fund, so we've seen some projects self-funding, or at the back have an agreement with some investor like us. We can also provide the DOT for self-funded bid. We still recommend, if any one of you still going for Parachains, to do a crowd loan. So we could like provide the upfront lead to put you in the lead, but then you get the community involved. Like Mandala Chain, we just support them. You see like you get the initial lead, and then you get like I think like close to 400 people actually contributing to the crowd loan, and then you can also help build your community. You can also work with little crowd loan providers like Bifrost. I think is the most active ones. They're also over there. We work very closely with them, or you can work with VC also to fund it. The incentives, as said, some of the good examples are where you can basically garner early support. I think Unique has done a great job last time around to make sure people come in early. Yeah, I mean, there's some case studies we can talk about in more detail if any of you still want to go for Parachain auctions. So you can see like successful cases which garnered early support. A few projects who overbid in our view. You also don't want to lock up your precious resources for 2 years. So it's very important to efficiently run this auction. Put in an early lead, garnered support, but without overpaying. And as said, we can help you if you need any more details on how to best structure these rewards. So let me hand over to Max to talk more about the new model and agile core time.
Yes, so I think what Mario provided here is a bit of a history lesson, but it is, as always, important to study the history if you want to look into the future. And that's why, for us, we started off with this crowd loan model, right? We've been supporting 17 projects or so in acquiring a Parachain slot. And now, obviously, with this shift to agile core time, we're also adjusting our business model. And I guess the reason why we're giving this talk here is to also throw it out there for some of you who might need to acquire Blockspace at some point in the future on how you can do it, but maybe even more importantly, how we can potentially help you on that. So, welcome to Agile Core Time. I think we had a few talks here already in the past that are going through Agile Core Time more from a technical perspective. What we're trying to do here over the next couple of minutes is to talk about it more from the economics perspective. All right, so the first thing that I want to talk about here is this lock or pay thing. So when Agile Core Time first came out, then a lot of people were like, oh wow, that's actually really, that's such a big change because suddenly we have to pay for it rather than just locking up our dot, right? Especially from the perspective of the supporters, right? If you support a crowd loan, traditionally you locked up your dot, but you're gonna get them back, right? So great. For the new model, you're actually gonna have to pay. And on the next slide, I'm talking more about like those dot getting burned. But I think the point of this slide here that I want to make is, it's actually not that different, right? It's just like a different way of framing it, like locking something for a period of 2 years or paying for it up front, just depending on where the values are. So it's not necessarily like such a huge difference. I mean, the key word obviously here is opportunity cost, right? That's what we have seen, but if you're locking up the dot for a period of 2 years, so in this very simple example here, like assume a 2-year lease, 18% staking rewards. So with the old like lock model, you start with 100 dot, but you have the opportunity cost where after 2 years, you're still gonna have 100 dot instead of 140, right? But if you pay, and let's assume that the upfront cost is 40 dot, right? Let's say that would be the equivalent price. And then you have the direct cost. After 2 years, you have 0 dot because you paid those 40 dot. So one way or another, you essentially spend 40 dot. So it's not that big of a difference, right? That's kind of the point that I want to make with this slide, depending on how the economics work out. But in theory, it's not like that much of a difference. Treasury or burn. So this is what I hinted at just before. Here, this is like I put up on the screen here like a comment from Jonas from the Web3 Foundation, who I think kind of pushed this discussion forward, and who clearly has like a bias or a preference, let's say, towards burning. And for us, I think, I'm generally with him on that point. I think it's more that it's the more elegant solution, right? It's not that like sending the core time sales to Treasury would be a horrible idea, right? It really depends on how you design the tokenomics. So it's also like you can make that point. It's also like a reasonable point to make. But it's a more elegant solution to send it to a burn address, right? Why is that? I would argue it's mainly because of a more predictable deflationary pressure, right? Polkadot has an inflationary model, but if you have the constant burn mechanism of core time sales, that's creating deflation, right? So inflationary pressure, deflationary, right? It kind of starts counteracting, like these two forces start to counteract, and that's generally like a good thing for the ecosystem and supposedly for the token price. I guess the other advantage here is one of stabilizing treasury inflows. And the reason why I say that is, usually, markets are cyclical in nature, right? And so during time of high activity and like high prices, you're also gonna have high core time sales, right? So that means more dot would go into the treasury during the time that there's a lot of activity anyways. Which you can argue, okay, that's great, right? But my counterpoint would be it's actually not that great, because on the flip side, right, in a bear market, and inevitably we're gonna have like a bear market at some point again, right? Then there's little activity, but then the treasury also doesn't get properly funded, right? That's kind of the big risk. And you should, as a treasury, you should like spend more counter-cyclical, right? Like during a bear market, pay more to get more like traction, get more projects on board. If you don't have core time sales, and as a result you don't have like many dot in your treasury, it's a bit of a it's not an ideal design in my opinion. Okay. Now, how does Blockspace get allocated? So how does core time get allocated? We're still like at the early stages, so we don't know exactly how it's gonna work, but we already see some third-party marketplaces popping up, right? Probably the most well-known one at this stage is Lastic, right? I guess many of you are already familiar with it. It's in development stage, so it's not live yet, but it will essentially be a way for people to purchase core time as they need it, right? So what does that mean for someone like us, right? We used to support Parachain auctions directly with the teams, and now with Lastic, we're most likely gonna become a core time broker, right? Because on a marketplace like Lastic, you can essentially buy bulk and sell spot, right? We don't know if it's, from our perspective, going to be a very attractive marketplace. It might well not be, in which case we're not going to dabble in it too much. But it might also be very attractive. So it's a nascent market, so we don't really know what it's going to be. But I think one important thing about core time is to say it's a bit like a commodity like bananas, right? You can't hoard them because they're going to rot. If you buy like 1 million containers of really cheap bananas, it doesn't really it's not a good business model, because after a few weeks they're gone, right? They're useless. So hoarding block space is not a good business model. That I can already say for sure. Yeah, I think I covered that already. This is like a bit of a funny way of putting it. I came up with this. I don't know if it's a great analogy, right? Because people are always saying like, are Parachain auctions going away? I will say, well, no, but rather than being forced to buy a house, we can rent, stay at a hotel or at an Airbnb. What I want to say with that is like, there's still a market, right? But the Parachain auctions used to be a pretty rigid market and a pretty long-term market, right? Like the equivalent of buying a house. Now, obviously, if you want to, just travel to a city, like to Bangkok here, for example, like I'm not going to buy a house if I just want to stay for a few days, right? That's essentially what core time does. You can still buy a house, right? You can still have long-term leases, but it also introduces the more flexible option of staying short-term. Yeah. The better question that I think you guys should ask yourself is, are crowd loans going away? And this is like a point that I was actually trying, if anyone listened to my other talks before, that's kind of like a point that I really want to make here, because I feel that is a bit the case, and it's a bit unfortunate, right? Because in the old model, right, like the crowd loans used to be like a great way of community building, right? I remember like a few a few years ago, like in 21, right? There were these memes going around, like what's the killer application of Polkadot, right? And the answer is crowd loans, right? That used to be really, I mean, it's a bit of a joke, of course, but there's also something to it, because I think it was, in 21, it was a great way of driving like interest into Polkadot, right? And people got excited about it, and they were like, oh wow, that's a great way how I can lock up my dot and therefore become a part of a project, right? I get those projects in return. In the new model of Agile Core Time, that's why I've got a question mark here, right? There isn't really an equivalent at this point, right? The idea is that as a project, you pay for your own core time, right? That's kind of the design, which you can say, okay, great, as long as it's very cheap, that's fine. No need to like, you know, do a complicated crowd loan and everything. But my opinion is still that it was a good way of community building, of getting people engaged. You know, Polkadot is kind of known for crowd loans. So my prediction, and it's really more a prediction, is that something along those lines will form again, right? Probably not directly in the core time module, but more likely on some third-party website or marketplace, right? So something where, you know, the community can go like, oh, this is a great project. We want them to get core time because we want to see them. But of course, you know, they're not running a charity either, and nor are we. So they want to be rewarded in one way or another. And like being rewarded in the native project tokens is very attractive. Okay, a little bit on the timeline. So expected on Kusama in Q1, yes, Q2. Polkadot, unclear. I mean, I'm sure you heard like a number of dates like floating around here during this conference already. Currently, like we've got this batch here till 4th of April, which is actually pretty soon. In all likelihood, there will be another batch after that of Parachain auctions, and you know, only then transitioning over to core time. What we have seen, this is also, you know, a bit of intel for you guys, is that now there's quite a race for the last couple of Parachain slots, right? Because everyone knows we're moving to core time, so people are quite, I won't say nervous, but you know, there's more predictability if you still can secure one of those last remaining slots. And that's why we have received actually quite a lot of requests from projects that are either trying to still renew, right, before we switch over to the new model, or who are new, who are not existing Parachains yet, and who still want to come in. And then also this point here, the branding. Look, I mean, it's going to go away, right? This aspect, but currently, and you know, if you just look around, you probably notice this, right? I mean, most Polkadot-based projects that are parachains, they get like it's a bit of a branding thing as well, right? So that's something that's going to go away with core time because, you know, it's agile. You can just use it for a day, so you don't have the same kind of branding mechanism anymore. All right, a few more, you know, a bit more background about ourselves. This is what we've done so far, okay? So these are all projects that we have supported so far in their crowd loan, right? And as a result of that, we hold their tokens. So it's public information. You can, you know, take a look at it. We're constantly like adding like new projects, but keep in mind we're not buying them on the secondary market, but this is all like through the crowd loans that we acquired these tokens. This is about our fund. I'm not going to go into details here. I think the only reason why I want to bring it up is because we have external LPs on here, right? We also put our own money into it, but we have outside LPs. You know, we're like a regulated fund that comes with like a few caveats, but you know, just wanted to throw this out there. So what does this transition mean for us, right? we're transitioning from crowd loan provider to core time broker. For your information, we're also gonna start doing other stuff, right? We're also gonna do traditional VC in the future. Traditional VC means paying dollar for tokens, right? Usually like on a seed round. But we're also gonna work more on the core time brokerage. And you know, from a project's perspective, right? The third point here, like, you know, of course you're gonna also raise from other VCs and you get dollar, which is great. But then, like when working with us, you don't have to spend all those dollars on core time, right? But we can provide that directly. This is like this little overview here, right? Blockspace is a very valuable resource. You know, you can even argue that that's actually what the one resource that Polkadot provides, right? Like, if you ask, like, what is Polkadot? It's a mechanism to provide you high quality block space, right? That's really, you know, what Polkadot is. And so think of it as, you know, a very, very important, very valuable resource. So since we've been working on this for many years, we kind of want to continue helping projects easily and, importantly, cheaply acquire block space that they can use for their project. Service scope, I'm going to skip through this, and thank you. Thank you, and yeah, let me know if there are any questions.
Is there any question for Max and Mario? Okay, thank you guys. Thank you, gentlemen,
Yeah.
for the
Thank you.
speak.
Okay.